I think it's safe to say that there are a lot of note-taking methods out there. And while it's good to have a lot of variety, I prefer simple note-taking, minimalistic note-taking, specifically the outline method. It's the main topic, subtopic, supporting details and examples, etc., all in bullet points going down. It's a very popular method and one that I used growing up all through from elementary, middle school, high school, all the way to college. I have tweaked it just a little bit to make it fit what I'm trying to accomplish, specifically with taking notes from books and how I really utilize my Commonplace book. It's still at its core is the outline method, but there are a couple things that I changed, and here's what they are. The first point being the title, author, and the page that I'm getting the information from. By the way, it doesn't have to be a book, but for the sake of this video, to keep it consistent, I'm using books as an example. The second bullet point is the passage itself, or the quote, or whatever piece of information it is that I want to capture and write down. So 1 and 2 are givens. That's really the core of note-taking anyways. These shouldn't be a surprise to you. But 3 and 4 are the ones that really, in my opinion, matter the most. Bullet 3 is my own personal interpretation of what it is that I wrote down, what it is that made me write down that piece of information. And then number 4 is a real life example. How can I anchor it down, connect it to my real world? How can I make it relate to not just myself, but the world that I live in? And have no fear, I am about to show you real examples of what it looks like and what I'm talking about in my Commonplace book. So let's jump right there. So I'm going to be using a real life example. This is from Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I think we've all heard of this book, or at least most of us have. This is one of my favorite books of all time, so I thought why not use this as one of the examples for this. So let me go to the page that I want to utilize for this example. Let me zoom in just a tad so you can see just a little bit better here. So this is the passage, right? Doing evil doesn't harm the universe, nor does one person's wrongdoing hurt another. It only hurts the person who is doing the wrong, and he can stop doing it whenever he wishes. So now that I found the passage I want to take a note on, this is where the Commonplace book comes in. So I wrote down the title, I wrote down the section of the book it's in. You can also write the author. That is, I recommend it, especially if it's an author you're not familiar with. Meditations, for my sake, I very clearly know it's by Marcus Aurelius, right? And then always, always, always add the page number. You want to create those breadcrumbs so you can come back to the book itself if you ever need to. And then obviously we have the passage here. And then the big key, the most important bullet point of this whole entire process is number 3. So let me just go over the quote just to give you some context to what I wrote right here. So again, doing evil doesn't harm the universe, nor does one person's wrongdoing hurt another. It only hurts the person who is doing the wrong, and he can stop doing it whenever he wishes. So the way I interpreted that is how I recorded it here. While not speaking in a complete literal sense, the message is clear. Your negative actions, even if aimed at someone or something else, only negatively affect yourself in the end. Thus, you will be the one with the burden of living with that. And then to elaborate on my interpretation further, I add a modern real-world example. Bullying another individual may seem to only impact or affect the one being bullied. However, in reality, this reflects how fundamentally broken the bully is. Thus, the more he bullies, he is only digging himself a deeper hole. So now I have 2 bullets going in depth thoroughly about this main initial quote that I found. And by doing this, I am confirming my own understanding, right? Everybody interprets things differently. But at this moment, on this day, when I read it and wrote this down, this is how I interpreted this quote. And what's really fun about this is over time, if my opinions change about this specific quote or topic, I can look back on what I once thought and then be able to, maybe jot down an updated version. So it's really important by adding your own interpretation of the quote that you're writing down, you are giving yourself, your future self, insight to what you were thinking in that moment when you took this note. Why did you take this note? Why did it stand out to you so much? And by the example, it just adds even further clarification to that. Now I'm going to do one of these pages completely from beginning to end with you. So here's a book that I'm currently reading, Lincoln in the Fight for Peace. and I'm about 60 or so pages into it, but I've already began taking notes and annotating in this book. So let me just find a good passage here that I haven't taken a note on yet, and I believe that's page 45, if I'm remembering correctly. Here it is. Okay. So this one right here is one that I've been meaning to elaborate more on and take note of. So this quote right here: even after 4 years of civil war, Lincoln refused to divide the country into us against them. Instead, the words "we" and "all" suffused the speech to recreate a sense of common destiny. So really powerful stuff, and I really liked it. So that's why I underlined it for later note-taking. And the key word is later note-taking. You don't want to stop reading just because I found something valuable, right? A really powerful quote. I don't want to close the book and grab my Commonplace book and start taking notes, right? Because that interrupts the whole process. The entire idea is to annotate while you read and keep reading. But once you reach the end of that reading session, that's when I go and I enter my Commonplace book. So let me write the title really quickly here. All right, so I wrote down the title, Lincoln and the Fight for Peace, author John Avalon, and the page 45. Simple as that, right? So now we're going to actually go in and get the actual quote down. So I'm just going to make a little line like this, skip a line, add another box, and then enter the quote. Perfect. So now I have the title, author, page, and then obviously the quote that I wanted to capture here. I'm going to draw another line down here. Now this third bullet point, this is where I put my interpretation. Why did this stand out to me? What made me want to write this down? So let's look at the quote again. Even after 4 years of civil war, Lincoln refused to divide the country into us against them. Instead, the words "we" and "all" suffused the speech to recreate a sense of common destiny. So, how and why does that stand out to me? Well, I can tell you right now, in this day and age of our political landscape, right? I'm not going to go into a political tirade here, but right away, the use of "us" and "we" it's just not used anymore. It's very much smear campaigns against the other candidates from both sides, right? From all sides. And we don't see that anymore. So right away, I'm telling myself, like, hey, this stands out to me for this reason. So I'm going to write that down. So let me show you an example. So I wrote out my interpretation, right? Right away, I find this focus on using the terms "we" and "us" so powerful because we rarely see both sides focus on the people and how to encourage unity. It's a very bad versus good strategy nowadays with politics. Now that we have these 3 points down, this is where the fourth optional one comes in. And personally, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think with this specific example it's needed because I kind of already put that example in my interpretation. But if I want, for the purpose of this video, right, I'll go ahead and do it anyways, just to give you a clear idea of what this looks like. So let me do another line and go down with another box. What I wrote is, during election time, there are endless commercials about why not to vote for the other candidate and less about why to vote for the one producing the commercial itself. So that's just a brief snapshot. And I could even elaborate further on these ideas if I wanted to, but the idea is to keep it as brief as possible, right? And even for someone watching this, they might think this is a little excessive. It could be way shorter than this. This is just, I just happen to run into some lengthy quotes, lengthy passages, and I tend to elaborate a lot when I talk about my interpretations. So that is why it's a little bit lengthy, but these could even be one-liners all the way down. And you also don't have to read nonfiction books or, philosophy or super serious subjects, right? You can be reading a fictional book. You could be listening to a fun podcast. Literally anything that stands out to you ever, or even if you're talking to someone. If someone makes a good point and you want to write down what point they made, and then again, same thing applies. Why did it stand out to you? What's your interpretation of it? And then again, the optional fourth point here is an example of a real world scenario, or it could even be a creation of a potential real world example. It doesn't have to be a fact, right? This is just something that helps further elaborate on your interpretation. So those were just brief ideas of how I currently do it. I could easily change it again in the future. This isn't anything set in stone. This is just something that I find currently working for me. This kind of minimal note-taking and simple note-taking method is really what note-taking should be. It should be easily digestible. And also at the end of the day, you're going to become a more active reader. You're not going to have the urge to skim through the pages as much. You're not going to have the urge to read passively. You're going to be more engaged through this way of note-taking. And it's going to actually become fun. Dare I say fun? Okay. People don't associate studying with fun a lot, but it can be pretty fun once you get it down. I encourage you to give it a try, but if you already have your own specific note-taking method, right? What is your preferred method of note-taking? Because we all have our own, at the end of the day, we all have our own method that we prefer. Do you have your own specific note-taking method? And if you do, let me know in the comments. I'm curious because I'm a nerd about this stuff, guys. I love learning more about notes, taking notes, reading, anything to do with learning and studying. I'm kind of a geek in that realm. Anyways, thank you so much for stopping by, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.